Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. My name is Chris Alaimo.
And I'm Ben Gassaway. Together, we are the Amateur Investors.
This podcast is our open source journal of everything we learn about investing and wealth management.
We're here to explore the key concepts, market dynamics, and investing strategies that will assist you on the path toward financial independence and financial literacy. Our mission is to build us up from amateurs to experts.
All suggestions are our own, and we recommend that you do your own research before taking any investment advice. See you in this week's episode. We hope you enjoy it. Hey, how's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Amateur Investors Podcast. This is episode 41. We've got a guest on today. We got Alaimo from CoinBeast Media, one of our partnerships or sponsors of the podcast. So we're really excited to have him here. Ben and I are thrilled to get this going. So I'll start with Adam's bio real quick, and then we'll get into it. So Adam's a founding partner at Stranded Energy Investments, where they invest in bringing stranded and wasted natural gas to market by mining Bitcoin on the Bitcoin network. He has a degree in business, and he has studied as a full stack web developer at Denver University. Since then, Adam has experience in operations management and strategic business planning. His passion for technology and Bitcoin has led him to explore business opportunities in the mining sector. He's currently the business development manager at UpStream Data Incorporated, a company that builds portable data centers for oil and gas producers to mine Bitcoin with stranded natural gas. In addition, Adam has been featured on several Bitcoin podcasts and publications such as BTC Sessions and Bitcoin Magazine. Adam is then donating all of his proceeds from CoinBeast Connect to Bitcoin core development, so you can learn while supporting the Bitcoin developers. Adam, thanks for coming on the show today. We're really excited to have you here.
Yeah, man, what an introduction. That's kind of crazy. Thanks for having me, guys. No, I'm excited to be here. I was just talking with Ben and listening a little bit about how you guys got started. So, it's always fun to connect with people in this space. One thing you realize is how small the world is, and really how small industries are, right? How few people actually run the world in a way. So yeah, no, glad to get to know you guys, and certainly glad to be here. Hopefully your audience likes what we have going on, not one just at CoinBeast, but also at UpStream Data.
Definitely. Yeah, Adam, seriously, thank you for coming on the show. Something I always like to ask folks, especially when they're in this space, and we're grateful to have someone who is has their finger on the pulse and is directly involved with the Bitcoin space. I think that just having your expertise on the show helps us amateurs for sure. One thing I always like to ask is, understanding, how you got into Bitcoin, maybe just that exposure point, because I think it context sets a little bit of sort of the hopscotch you play with sort of understanding the industry, understanding the technology. But I think after maybe you give your intro of where you were exposed to, I think it's always kind of fun to learn that. Secondly, I would also like to understand really how you got exposed into the stranded energy piece of Bitcoin mining. Like, what was that segue of not just simply an introduction to the space, but then, a participatory sort of aspect in your life. So maybe just start with your exposure point first.
Yeah. And I mean, I think my story is maybe a little different than most. And I'd say both those stories occurred simultaneously. Kind of both those events occurred more or less at the same time. The cool thing about talking about my story is really, I'm nobody, right? I'm nobody special. I'm some, kid from Colorado that just happened to stumble into the oil and gas industry and stumble into a massive opportunity. The way I got there was by happen chance, right? I was managing a retail store, a couple of retail stores actually, package ship stores. Those ones you can go drop off your Christmas presents and
yep.
Yeah, exactly. I was managing a couple of those UPS stores, and a customer came in to make a whole bunch of copies. And while his copies were printing, he watched me, run around the store like a maniac, trying to manage this store that we were understaffed and way too busy. And, I'm not just the person that just quits, right? So I just work harder until the problems are solved. So, he was watching me, and by the time he checked out, he had given me a business card and told me he wanted to hire me. And I kind of thought it was he was just another one of those guys that either was trying to boost his own ego and be a hot shot,
or sell you something.
Job or yeah. And honestly, or sell me something. Honestly, it was going to be a multi-marketing kind of, multi-level marketing thing or something. And so like, I honestly, I had enough problems going on in the store that I was like, cool, man. And then like, I just moved on with my day, but he ended up calling, and then I met with him, and he ended up hiring me. He gave me an offer to walk away from the retail job to enter the oil and gas industry. This was toward the end of 2017. And at this point I had heard about Bitcoin years before, like 2014, I think, was when I had a good friend who had told me about it and had tried to tell me to buy it, right? I think it was around like the $200 mark or something. And I was a fool and didn't listen to him, right? One of the reasons I didn't listen to him, we had like a 5-hour car ride together. And one of the conversations we talked about during that car ride was Bitcoin. One of the things he couldn't really answer to me though was how it was produced, was how it was mined, right? He knew that mining was complicated, and it had essentially become industrialized and specialized, right? Because you got to think like 2014 ASICs are just really starting to pick up, and like mining farms are starting to become real. And so it's like, if you want to mine competitively, you probably got to get to scale. So like and he wasn't a miner. He's much more of a financial miner. He's a trader and stuff and such. So, he understood the financial characteristics about Bitcoin that were great, but he didn't really understand the aspects of mining really either. So he didn't really explain it to me very well. So at that point, like, I just was disinterested. But then you fast forward to, me working in a UPS store, and I end up getting a job in the oil and gas industry. And the job that I got hired for was to go around to oil and gas shows and be essentially the director of marketing and sales for this software company. So the guy that handed me the business card, he wasn't, just full of it. He actually owned a software company that was really successful. Not really successful, but successful and healthy, right? They didn't have any debt. They had a great clientele, but they hadn't really tried to grow their product. Like, they hadn't actively gone and pushed it on people. They'd only grown just kind of by word of mouth, and they had such low overhead that every time they gained a new customer, it was just a new win. So they decided to take on some extra overhead, a new employee, myself, and send me around to oil and gas shows. And in order to sell, and I realized really quickly, okay, so starting this job late 2017, December, early 2018, I went to a couple oil and gas events, and I realized really quickly, I'm talking like within the first 6 conversations, I realized that, one, I was probably the dumbest guy in the room. Okay, like, it didn't matter what room I was in oil and gas, I was probably the dumbest guy there. I was certainly the dumbest guy when it came to oil and gas. But just on like a basic intelligent level, I was dumber than these people. These people are incredibly intelligent. Petroleum engineers, geologists, mechanical engineers, these are not stupid people. And they have a high degree of self-discipline, and they've got an incredible nose for bullshit, right? So you can't fool them, right? You can't sell them something that you yourself don't understand. And the problem I had was, I knew that we were selling a software product. I knew that it helped them, but I didn't know why it helped them. I didn't really understand the intricacies of how this was going to provide value. So when I told my bosses that, I said, listen, like, I'm a good salesman, but I could be the greatest salesman in the world. Doesn't matter. These people don't buy unless I truly am fluent and proficient with what I'm selling. So my bosses made me do production accounting. So we were doing production accounting for a couple of oil and gas companies. So they made me be the guy that actually sits at the computer every month and runs through the daily volumes, the oil, gas, and water volumes, allocates them all properly, and sends the report off to the state and to the federal regulators. And within 2 months of doing production reporting, I understood upstream oil and gas day-to-day operations like as much as a pumper did, because I had the pumper's sheet and all of the information that he relays back to the office that gets accounted for and put into the spreadsheet, into the system. I had to be fluent with all that. So like, literally, I'm like, okay, what's an injection volume? What's a casing pressure? What's a tubing pressure? Why do we have, what the hell is a VOC? It's a volatile organic compound, like one breath of a VOC and you're dead. Like, so, that's why there's a VOC latch and a seal there, and we have to keep track of it. Like, so I understood oil and gas all of a sudden, at least the upstream production side of it, really well. And one aspect of that data that I understood fluently was how much gas gets wasted, because flared gas is an important metric when you're reporting to the state. Some states, they make you separate out your flared gas, and some states, if you're using gas on lease, they don't make you can deduct that. And so it's like its own special category. And because of that, I had just a great understanding of how much energy was out there in the world that we were just lighting on fire because there was no economic way by which to bring it to a populous center. And when that idea when I understood how Bitcoin mining worked, that idea was what made me excited, right?
Yeah, so let's dig into that. I definitely want to dig in that pretty deeply, actually, because that in itself is sort of the crux, or really rather the misnomer about Bitcoin being wasteful of energy. I think that's immediately what people go to if you're, a no coiner and you don't even want to like look at Bitcoin. And look, I have an environmental engineering background. Like I am definitely a very uh, environmentally conscious person. But when you dig into the data and try to make sense of what Bitcoin enables you to do with energy, especially stranded energy, it's a no-brainer. I would love to dig a little bit deeper and understand, that scope of wasted energy that's, in the oil and gas sector, and why Bitcoin brings a solution to the table and doesn't pull away from our energy mix. I think people just have a misunderstanding of what the energy sector really is to begin with. So I'd love to peel back that
Yeah,
onion.
no, definitely. And I'd love to dive into it. I think you're right. People just have there's an education issue, right? There's a massive educational gap of how power is generated and how energy is produced, period, I think, right? So that's just like it's in the same way that people understand how money works, people understand how electricity works or how energy works. And so that's just, and by the way, I didn't either. I was sitting in in a UPS store. I mean, prior to 2018, I didn't know I understood gasoline, right? As much as the next person, but I sure as hell didn't understand how it got to the pump.
Yeah. Until you do it, you don't know,
Until you do it. Yeah. Until you're immersed in it, there's no real, there's not much benefit to understanding, and it's complicated, and it's a vocabulary. So anyway, I'd say this, from my perspective, this is what was so amazing to me. This was the aha moment for me. Was first, let me put it this way. How did I find Bitcoin? Well, I was seeing news articles in early 2018 about how the Ponzi, the bubble had popped, the scam was over. And I just was curious to understand how the scam worked. Like that was truly the reason I went to go. And I remember my buddy telling me about Bitcoin, right? Those years before. And I remember him not being able to necessarily tell me, how it was mined, how it was produced. And I figured that if it was a scam, right, the guys who are producing this are probably the scammers, right? Like they're probably the ones like getting away with a bunch of money and pulling the wool over everyone's eyes. So I went to investigate how Bitcoin was mined and what the hell Bitcoin mining was. And this is the aspect of Bitcoin mining that enlightened me, I guess. And it was when I understood that thermodynamic law dictates a lot of boundaries of computer science. Right? And one of those boundaries of computer science that thermodynamic law dictates is that you can't generate a computational hash. You can't make a computer execute its basic function, changing a 0 to a 1, without at least some nominal amount of electricity or energy. And when by the way, that's not a crazy or very complicated concept to understand. It's like, hey, it's kind of like the law of conservation of energy, right? It's the idea that, no matter how efficient your computer is, you can't change a 0 to a 1 by using 0 energy, right? Like, okay, well, yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Like, of course, you're going to have to use at least some. Well, when you understand that, you understand there are limitations to generating computational work, right? There are thermodynamic limitations to generating computational work. And when I understood just that concept, when I just had thought about that concept, I went, holy shit, Bitcoin mining isn't a scam. Producing Bitcoin isn't a rigged game. It's an open and competitive energy market. Right? This is an open and competitive autonomous energy consumption market. So all you need is an internet connection. And now you can sell any type of energy so long as you put it into this form of computational work. You put it in the form of changing zeros and ones. And with cryptography, we can measure that with incredible precision, right? And so it almost becomes this thing where a computational hash over a period of, a number of computational hashes over a period of time is almost identical to a measurement of energy because of how thermodynamic law impacts circuitry, right? Impacts how electrons travel. So when I understood that, I went, holy crap, like I know where there is so much energy in oil and gas, primarily gas, right? Natural gas, that has no means by which to be brought to market. What that means is there's a lot of oil wells that are geographically located in places where for them to build a pipeline or to get pipeline infrastructure so they could sell that gas to market, the investment is so great that the ROI, no one's ever going to invest in that, right? It's like, oh yeah, we'll spend $50 million to make $100 a day. It's like, no, nobody's going to spend $50 million to earn $100 a day. They're just going to burn the gas.
Mm-hmm. We have so Ben and I, or Ben used to, we work at a company called Covanta, and we do waste energy. So we
Oh,
kind
awesome.
of have a very good understanding of how power is generated, at least from burning trash. But yeah, similar to us, we kind of see, or our company saw wastage of so we burn trash. We produce electricity by spinning a turbine, spins a generator, it goes to the grid. We also recover the metals from that are in trash, so we use magnets and eddy current separators to do that. But one of the pieces that's wasted is the bottom ash, or the ash from, you burn garbage, like any fire or any pit, it goes to
Right, it's
ash
carbon.
in the end. So in the end, there's probably a 25-cent per ton fee. I forget what it is. I think it's like 25 cents per a certain amount per pound, whatever it is, that we have to send to a landfill. So ultimately, we're not full life cycle, but we saw probably 5 years ago that some concrete smelters, if we were able to get enough metal out, they would actually use it as aggregate concrete. It's kind of like a sand, basically, but we were trying to build this thing called Total Ash Processing, TAPS is the acronym for it. So yeah, kind of like what you saw like, instead of using the flare gas as a waste and or an environmental compliance issue, you could see it as something, if we can sell it for even a penny, that's better than spending 25 cents or whatever it is.
Exactly. And those were the economics I knew intimately from doing production accounting, right? I knew intimately that these guys were being fined X amount of dollars per MCF, that, per 1,000 cubic feet of gas that they were emitting. So that even if they could install a system that was break even on the margin, over time, they would see it as an ROI because of the reduction in cost, right? A cost savings is the same as a new revenue stream to these guys, right? So it's all right pocket, left pocket. So yeah, absolutely. And I understood those economics intimately. And that's when I went, holy shit, okay, so then I just set on a mission to convert, right? Because again, I was the dumbest guy in the room, right? I didn't know how to convert natural gas to electricity. I didn't know what a generator cost. I sure as hell didn't know what generator scaling, or what does generating power on site look like. I knew that guys were already doing it because I was accounting for guys that were already generating power on site. So I knew it was a thing. So I just kept getting this balance of like, I went and explored everybody in my network in oil and gas. Everyone I had talked to the first, 100 days of being in the industry, I was on the phone with them, like bringing up this idea. They were all laughing at me, but they would still humor my questions and then answer them. And then once I ran the numbers and saw what the economics looked like, I realized like this is going to absolutely and utterly disrupt the oil and gas industry beyond what anybody thinks, right? And I started getting I was on like cloud nine, like couldn't sleep, kind of excited, right? And I was going to oil and gas shows, and it was cool because I was in this industry that I knew was about to get disrupted by this awesome technology I was super passionate about. I thought liberated the individual, right? And gave people a weapon to protect themselves against their central bank. And I'm going around oil and gas shows talking to guys like, hey man, you got flare gas and stuff? And like seeing if they're open to the idea. And everyone's treating me either one, like I was some type of like an environmental police, undercover agent. Like nobody wants, like if you go up to them, they're like, hey, how much flare gas you got? They're like,
I'm from the government. I'm here to help, right? You've heard that before.
Yeah, I'm from the government. I'm here to help. Exactly. Like they were like, what's your play here? Like, are you looking to get me in trouble with the EPA or something? When really I'm sitting there like, I want to talk to them about this magic internet money and how I think it can solve their waste energy issue. And then even when I would get there, they just laugh at me. I mean, they like, this guy's a kook, to the point where like my bosses at the company, the guy who came into the UPS store to hire me was like, stop talking about this. Like, it makes us look like idiots, and and it did. It was hurting my own reputation by being excited about something everybody thought was stupid. But then, and then you fast forward to today, here we are. I would say hands down, it's the hottest topic in oil and gas right now is mining Bitcoin using flare gas. So, I mean, it's just, and it's only been what, maybe 1,200 days?
Yeah, I imagine like the engineers from back then, like, remember that crazy kid that was going around telling us?
Oh, absolutely. There are people out there who they were like, hey, you remember that kid at NAPE who came up and just started talking to us about that? Like, yeah, there's people that remember me just as that person that was talking about that everyone was laughing at. And maybe they, they've come around. But even the guys at UpStream Data, right? I mean, as much as I was getting laughed at, you got to think about my boss, Steve Barber or Ryan Dutton, our CSO. I mean, Ryan Dutton said this in a Global News Canada interview. He said that oil and gas producers were calling him and asking him like, what, you're mining Mario coin? Like, they called it Mario coin to him, and like that was their perspective on this thing. And now that's still kind of their perspective on this thing in a way, but they understand it warrants a level of seriousness because you look at the price of Bitcoin and nobody can argue that. You can't argue those numbers, and you can't argue the fact that your competitor, that oil and gas company over there, is getting $7 per MCF and you're getting $2 per MCF with your gas, and you're flaring some. Like, how long until they buy you out and outcompete you?
Yeah.
Right? Like, you're toast.
So for someone who doesn't really understand sort of like the model, so there's two things I want to do. One, I want to ask this question I'm going to ask. And then second, I want to really kind of break down just maybe a rudimentary understanding of like what Bitcoin mining even is. And I want to hear it from someone who's in the industry. So the question I want to ask is, for someone who would come up to you and say, maybe not knowing the economics of like Bitcoin mining, sort of like the drivers of, variable costs, which is your cost of power. That if someone comes up to you and says, hey, like Bitcoin mining is going to just cause more oil wells to be drilled into the ground, what do you say to that person? Concerned about, just pumping out oil. Will that be the case? Knowing that you're seeking out wasted gas, what is your response to that person?
My response is yes. And that's a good thing.
Why do you say that?
Because the quality of life over human history is, there's a cause-effect relationship with the energy density per capita, right? If you look at and primarily energy consumption, right? So primarily the density of energy consumption. If you look at all of history, the quality of life improves as energy consumption improves.
But my question being,
I say that I always think more energy production and more energy consumption is a good thing. It shows an increase in the leveraging of technology. See, I'm not a consumption or a production minimalist. I don't think we need to produce or consume less energy to save the planet. I don't. I think we need to innovate, right? I think we need to mitigate waste always. We don't have an energy supply problem on this earth. We have an energy utilization and distribution problem on this earth. Like, let me promise you. And I think the story that we're going to run out of fossil fuels is nonsense. I think the story that we're going to eliminate fossil fuels in a decade is a pipe dream.
So do you disagree with like the Jack Dorsey white paper on Bitcoin is driving towards like a renewable energy? Because the kind of thing that I've heard frequently is that Bitcoin miners are drawn towards renewable sources in addition to stranded sources, because that drives the cost of power closer to zero. Like, is that true?
Yeah, see, I disagree. I disagree I agree to some degree that I think Bitcoin mining improves every single upstream energy production process and power generation process, right? It improves the economics of wind, solar, hydroelectric, geothermal, nuclear, fossil fuels. All of it. The economics are improved because you now have optionality. You now have a secondary energy consumption market to leverage to your benefit, right? It's gonna help intermittent power, right? I like to call it intermittent power rather than renewable power. But intermittent power like wind and solar is incredibly inefficient. When the wind's blowing, typically people aren't consuming. When the sun's shining, typically people aren't consuming. And when they're consuming, typically it's not. And so there's these massive areas of loss between trough and demand and power generation within wind and solar. What's the solution to that? Elon Musk's industrial battery use case is the only one that people had until we look at something like Bitcoin mining, because it's a secondary energy consumption market. So yes, I agree with Dorsey in the sense that wind and solar as an investment, much more attractive post Bitcoin mining than pre-Bitcoin mining. This technology makes investing in solar and wind way more pragmatic and attractive, but it doesn't make them cheaper than natural gas. It just doesn't. And this technology improves fossil fuels production, about the same as it is a catalyst of fossil fuel production as much as it's a catalyst to any other energy production. And beyond that, Bitcoin miners, this is going to incentivize people to go out and seek out stranded energy sources, seek out stranded geothermal and stranded solar or wind. And by the way, I'm not like anti-solar or wind. I think there's some amazing applications specifically to solar. I think solar can have some great applications. But the idea that we're just going to like flip a switch, turn off all fossil fuels and just flip on this new virtuous, hey, all of our energy comes from the sun, so we all should feel better about the world. It's just, that's not the argument, right? That's a bastardization of reality.
We're just not there yet, right? I mean, that's
right. I mean, how are we going to maintain wind turbines when they're made of an epoxy resin? Right? Epoxy resin is a petroleum product.
Right.
You know how many petroleum products go into maintaining a windmill, let alone erecting it, transporting it, let alone, I don't know, disassembling it and maybe disposing of it? Do you know how they dispose of wind turbines? I do. They bury them in the ground. And it's epoxy resin, a petroleum product that's going to last for 50,000 fucking years. I mean, it's a joke. The investment, this is not about saving the planet. This is about adding a new column in the accounting book called carbon credits or virtue signaling. And that way you can operate at an economic loss. But so long as you have enough virtue credits, you're profitable, your business is good. On the taxpayers'
you
dime.
hope that the technology evolves.
I mean, how do you tell me I'm
right?
wrong?
Well, I don't think you're wrong. I think there's like benefits to, so with producing anything or generating any power, there's going to be a consumptive side. I think in theory, by increasing your energy mix to renewable source, the energy to create those new assets will be using renewable energy, right? Like if you were able to charge your electric trucks, I mean, this is an idyllic scenario, but the goal would be you've offset at least, right? Like if you can offset some.
See, but I don't know about the offset. That's where I'm at. I'm like, I think about a solar panel. A diesel bulldozer dug into the ground to get the rare earth minerals. A diesel engine powered the barge to ship those across the ocean. Diesel motor transported it to manufacturing facility. Coal electricity powered the manufacturing plant. You got a solar panel. You then shipped it using diesel across another ocean. And what's your carbon impact? That thing hasn't generated a single fucking watt of electricity yet.
But once it does, then you have
let's be honest. But once it does, how long does it have to before you get it back?
I mean, you have 15, 20 years of output that otherwise would be used to mine or extract a fossil fuel, right? So you have 20-ish years of production that's not doing that process again, right?
I mean, right, but it's reliant upon the fossil fuel process in order to even exist, right? So it's like, what you're telling me is that bread is going to make wheat obsolete.
Right? I don't think that's
it is, because without fossil fuels, you can't produce solar panels. Without fossil fuels, you can't produce or maintain wind turbines, right? Sure, there can be an energy mix, but the abolishment of fossil fuels, it's a pipe dream and it'll never happen.
I hope you're wrong, but I would like to hear your technical understanding of mining, because I think that I would love to hear that. I think people get confused with mines versus nodes. And really how that fits into the Bitcoin ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, Bitcoin mining is probably one of the most ingenious inventions or discoveries. I'm not really, again, it's tough to say, but one of the most ingenious things to ever arise ever. It's an amazing counterbalancing mechanism. The way it works is pretty simple. And it's a beautiful way to solve a problem that I think I could never solve. And the problem that Bitcoin mining solves is, how do you fairly distribute all of these Bitcoin over the course of 1.5, 2 centuries, right? If you were Satoshi Nakamoto and you had to come up with a way to distribute this currency and by the way, you don't care about getting rich or anything, right? Your only goal is to make a currency that is truly fairly distributed. It's fair, and nobody can bastardize it or manipulate the production of this new currency. How do you come up with that, right? And the fair part is the one that would screw up me the most. I could come up with ways to defend how people couldn't screw with the monetary policy, sure. But what's fair, right? And the way that the mechanism by which he came up with was, we'll have a set monetary schedule, right? So we'll have it where this many coins will get released for this period of time, so that it'll equal this many coins, and then we'll decrease it to this many coins over this period of time, will equal this coin, and that will be our monetary schedule. And because it's diminishing, the earlier people come to contribute to the network, the more they'll be rewarded by the network. And from that point on, he created fair distribution using cryptography and proof of work consensus. And so let me kind of explain what that is to me, at least. In a nutshell, mining Bitcoin is solving a really complex problem, and the solution to that extremely complex problem is the next block on the network, right? So what you're doing when you're mining Bitcoin is you're trying to figure out the next block. You're trying to solve for the next block. And when you solve a block, what that does is it provides digital space for transactions to be encrypted and stored for all time, right? Now, in order to find a block, like I said, you have to solve this really complex problem. Well, in order to solve a really complex problem, you have to put in a lot of work, right? Because you have to guess all the possible answers that are wrong before you get the one that's right. And so that's where mining comes in, where the more guesses that you can throw at this problem, the increased likelihood that you solve the problem. And so every day, there's people like myself all around the world that have computers hooked up to the Bitcoin network, and all we're trying to do is solve for the next block. And if we solve for the next block, we get rewarded some Bitcoin. So it's constantly a balance of spending less money on electricity to run these computers than you get rewarded from the network for solving the next block. And that's the entire game, right? That's the economic game of this. And so there's the variables that come into play are a little bit maybe different than what people think, because there's a concept here that is new to humans, and it's absolute scarcity. The thing that's different about Bitcoin mining is no matter how many people mine Bitcoin, that monetary schedule is the same, right? That the amount that get rewarded every day, exactly the same and predetermined. So the things that determine your own personal profitability are really two things. One, the price of Bitcoin, okay? And two, the amount of total competition, right? The amount of people you're competing with. If the amount of people you're competing with goes down, you're going to make more Bitcoin. If it goes up, you're going to make less Bitcoin. And so that's why people are constantly trying to get the most efficient machines, right? Because then they produce more work per unit of electricity. And that's really the game, right? And so what it is essentially, effectively, is a race to the most efficient energy source. And that's why I think, and our philosophy at UpStream Data is, we believe the people that are most fit to compete and mine Bitcoin are, those who own hydroelectric dams, any governments with, nuclear power or massive energy assets, and the oil and gas industry, certainly the oil and gas industry of North America, because North America has a unique circumstance where individuals can have mineral rights. I mean, that's unique to the United States. Nowhere else in the world do you own what's under the ground. The government owns what's under the ground, even if it's on your land. In fact, they'll come and rip your house down most of the time. But in the United States, you can actually own minerals. And so you own all the way to the fucking core of the earth as far as the government's concerned. And so
I didn't know about that. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, in fact, to the point where if like a pipeline goes through your property, you can get a royalty on it. Even though it's underground, you know what I mean? Like, so it's unique to the United States. Very cool. It's one of those, hoorah America liberty things where it's like, awesome, you can own minerals here. You can have water rights, So here in the United States, just in the US, and just what's reported, which is not very precise. I worked in production management and production accounting. Let me tell you, what gets reported to the government and what actually takes place on site in the oil and gas field, not always identical. But what gets reported is what ends up being real, right? That's the historical data. That's what is, the fact. And so right now, I think it's like anywhere from 1.7 to 3 billion cubic feet of natural gas gets wasted every day in the United States. And that's enough to generate anywhere from, not how much of that gas is perfectly sweet and viable, ready for combustion. Not all of it. Some of it would need to be treated, obviously, things like that. But, napkin math tells me we're looking at 5 to 12 gigawatts of continuous power generation, maybe 15 gigawatts of continuous power generation. We're talking about powering the entire network a couple times over. And that's just the United States. Not even talking about Canada, which is comparable to the United States, without even talking about Russia. Nigeria is flaring. The entire country of Nigeria runs on diesel. Literally every business has a diesel generator behind it, and that's how they electrify the country. They have like very shit grid infrastructure, but diesel generators are plentiful, and diesel's everywhere. It's really cheap, but they flare more gas than damn near anybody. I mean, obviously Iran and Saudi, the oil rich nations, they're all looking at this technology because they've all been burning gigawatts of potential power for decades, and now there's a new way. And so for me, the bullish case for Bitcoin, the killer app of Bitcoin is the way in which it rescues stranded energy, the way in which it solves not just stranded, but waste energy, right? As a byproduct. I'm talking with guys that are in the CBD distilling business, right? And they vertically integrated. They own hemp farms, they own massive CBD distilleries and processing, and then downstream retail for their CBD and THC products. One of their biggest manufacturing problems that they have right now is they have a byproduct of ethanol that's mixed with all this, cannabis pulp. And it's like it's essentially like the gasoline you put in your car. It's like 90% pure ethanol, and they have to go, it's very expensive and very tedious. In this special way, they have to like unload this stuff into these bays, and they have to like spread it and lay it out and let that ethanol evaporate, which can take like weeks. And then they take all that plant matter, all that pulp, and once all the ethanol is evaporated out of it, they truck it over and they drop it off to farm animals, and the animals can eat the
They just
the
let
plant
it
matter.
disappear.
They literally let the ethanol evaporate, right? Because they have nothing else to do with it. But now they're looking at it. Now they're like, shit, if we could spend just even a little bit of money, like straining out the plant matter and finding a way in which to leverage this energy source and generate electricity, they're looking at mining Bitcoin because their business is growing to a degree. They're going to have so much waste. The amount of power they can generate, we're talking about like 6 megawatts, 10 megawatts of power that they could continuously generate with the amount of waste that they're producing. And so like, there's ways that I don't even know about yet. And waste, energy dense waste that's out there, Bitcoin mining rescues it, and they're all coming. I mean, it's going to be really exciting.
Yeah. So, I mean, Adam, as you know, you mentioned that a lot of the flare gas that's coming off from oil and gas is methane or natural gas. And most people in the energy industry, methane's like 25 times more harmful to the environment than CO2. And
even more. Yeah, like 60x.
Yeah,
like 60 times.
I think I forget what I think there was a range of 25 to 60.
It varies, but it's double digit for sure.
It's crazy.
Yeah, CH4 is way worse than what you exhale.
It's bad news.
And I think that there is an education aspect that's kind of misunderstood. I think all of us understand, being in an energy producing business, or we do. Like, people think that to produce energy or to produce anything, they like see CO2 as an emission and they immediately freak out like you're emitting to the environment. But as you know, for any process, if you just do a simple heat and energy balance, or I guess not simple, I went to school for chemical engineering to do it. But if you do a mass and energy balance, you realize that CO2 is a byproduct of producing anything, of combusting anything, of producing anything. Like, there's going to be CO2 emissions. Obviously, we want to mitigate those, and taking something that's more harmful than CO2 and converting it into something that's usable and protects a network, or the strongest and most secure monetary network. I see that as a net benefit for humanity in general. I know that there's kind of confusion. So I know I just set up my Bitcoin node a few months ago. I've kind of been in the Bitcoin space for about a year. I actually bought a few days after Michael Saylor. So I know he mentioned in the conference, he was like, yeah, I bought it around like June 4th. I think I bought it like June 6th or 7th or whatever. But there's kind of a misconception. Even my parents, who I talk about Bitcoin, and my girlfriend, they all kind of are kind of fed up with me talking about it. But I set up a node a few months ago. My mom was literally like, oh, so this is mining Bitcoin? Can you give them like a low-level breakdown of the difference between a node and a miner? I feel like that's an area that's definitely glossed over, and people kind of mix the two often.
Yeah, a node and a miner?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's kind of interesting because there's like a mining node, right?
Yeah.
So, well, that's the thing. So a node is a local copy of the entire Bitcoin blockchain. So it's like 350 gigs, right? Which you can fit on a little
it's smaller
terabyte drive. Yeah, exactly. Smaller than like the Call of Duty online Battlefield, whatever. Yeah. And when you're running a node, all you're doing is you're keeping a local copy of the Bitcoin blockchain. And then every time there's an update to the Bitcoin blockchain, in other words, every time a miner finds a new block, you just go check their work, and you check it and you say, hey, does the solution to the block actually, does it work? Like, is it compatible? And by the way, you don't have to do this as an individual. It's not like you're sitting there like checking the blocks. Like this is an autonomous process. But what's happening in the background is it's just a computer that's checking your local copy versus the copy that's out there in the world that just got updated. And it's if it says, yeah, like that one looks good, then it updates your local copy, right? And so what that means is just thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people around the world just have a local copy of the entire Bitcoin blockchain, every transaction that's ever happened in the history, like 12 years or whatever now. And they're just constantly verifying to make sure that everybody else in the world is telling the truth. And so we're all just out there verifying that everyone's telling the truth. What a Bitcoin miner is, in terms of the machine, it's just one of those machines that tries to guess the solution to the Bitcoin problem, right? It looks like this.
Yeah.
Right. There's a Bitcoin miner. So the idea that, now this is where you can be confusing, is that all miners for the most part, or at least the mining pools, they run what's called a mining node. And so that's how when they find a new block, they're the first node to add the new block. And then they broadcast to all the other nodes and they say, hey, could you guys check this out and see if this is right? And all the other nodes check it and they say, yeah, it looks right. And then they broadcast out to all these other nodes and they all check and they check. And it's just this spider web, right, of verification. And it just lives and breathes like that, right? So that's the difference. Is you can run a node for maybe you might need about $120 of hardware, you need like a terabyte of hard drive and then like a little computer, Raspberry Pi. So maybe $120 or something. It'll probably use a couple dollars a month in electricity, but it's nothing.
And we're actually running a service. So we just started this a couple weeks ago. We will actually build nodes for people that are confused or unaware, or they're worried about it. Yeah, so we opened up a service.
What are you guys doing? Are you guys using like Umbrel or anything?
We're using Umbrel as the one that we default to, but it's
the easiest. I mean, their interface is great. How you just go to local.umbrel, on your local network like that anybody can figure out local.umbrel once they have it plugged in.
Yeah, so we'll set up the Raspberry Pi, connect it to the USB, or not the USB, the hard drive, and then basically we'd ship it out. We'll wrap it up and ship it to people, and then basically we'll leave the instructions for how to go to Umbrel, how to link it to it, and then you're all good to go. But yeah,
dude, that's awesome. I'm gonna have to team up with you guys because I've been giving away these hash hut these node cases. So this is like an identical print from one of our Bitcoin mines that we delivered to the oil field. Yeah. So CryptoCloaks printed this, and so you can actually put your Bitcoin node, like your Raspberry Pi and everything in there, and then there's fans right on here to actually push on the intake. You get exhaust. I mean, it's awesome. It's exactly.
Cool. It's electrified. Like it's actually powered.
Oh yeah, no, there's fans in here that you plug in their Raspberry Pi fans.
I didn't know if it was just like an aesthetic thing that actually is a functional fan. That's really cool.
Yeah, these are real Raspberry Pi fans that
that's sweet.
They're the Raspberry Pi fans you plug into the Raspberry Pi board, and so and this is exactly like our hash huts design. So it's like, I mean, this is one of the coolest node cases. It's a little pricey. It's like $100, but man, I've already given away 2 of these. I'm probably going to give away like at least 50 of these in the next couple of years. Like I
definitely got to link up with you to get one of those after this. All right. So I guess my last question before we really start wrapping up, and Adam, thank you once again. It's been a pleasure having you on. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you're solving the Bitcoin, the SHA-256 algorithm, and the miners are all competing to solve that problem. So I know I run my own node, so I can see as transactions come in, and on average, it's every 10 minutes. Obviously, with the difficulty adjustment and people coming on and off the network, we can see changes. We talked about how China's going offline. Like what is that? 35% of the hash or 40% of the global hash went offline, basically. So we obviously saw the price drop, and then hash has been recovering in Kazakhstan and Iraq, and hopefully a lot of it's coming to the States. A lot of us in the Bitcoin community hope that it's coming to the States to bring more jobs here. But in the way when you're solving a hash, let's just say you solve for a block and you get it, but then another miner solves 3 minutes later, or the vice versa, even if another block solves for it 30 minutes later. Do you get that whole block for that whole time? Once the new hash is found, it closes your old block? I've kind of always been confused at how that works. So, if I solve for a block and a new one's not found for 30 minutes, do I get those 30 minutes of transactions in my block, or does it shut down after 10 minutes? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it's really a matter of space.
Okay.
Right. So what happens is, Yeah, so that's where like I love watching mempool that space, right? So they have a great way of kind of showing you how this occurs. And so each block can only fit so many transactions, right? That's part of the FUD to Bitcoin's scalability. People say, well, Bitcoin can't scale to X amount of transactions per second because of its limits. And they're right. Bitcoin layer 1 can, right? I mean, like the settlement layer is not going to scale. Even if you increase the block size, the analogy that Guy Swan gives, which I think is a beautiful analogy, is like, you know, the difference between using a cup of water to empty the ocean and, you know, Bitcoin Cash came along and they were like, hey, we have a 5-gallon bucket. And we were like, yeah, but like that, like, yeah, you're right. That is faster, but it doesn't solve the fucking problem here, right? Like it's not a solution. It's better maybe than, you know, like as a marginal tact. But really layer 2 is where Bitcoin scales. So yeah, there's limited space on layer 1. So really as a miner, if you find a block, you're incentivized to include the transactions that are paying the highest fee per byte. So what you do is you just
include a cap of the memory limit, basically.
Up into the cap into the of the block size limit. So you literally just include the most lucrative transactions of the ones waiting to be transacted. I mean, that's why Bitcoiners, I think, have given such crap to this idea of like mining compliant blocks, is because we're sitting there like, you're telling me that you're going to ignore people who pay an exorbitant fee because it's not a transaction that's approved by you. Like, in other words, you're just a terrible Bitcoin miner. Like you're not doing your shareholders any favors. You're just virtue signaling and leaving money on the table for the sake of what?
Yeah.
Like feeling better about yourself. Like this is stupid.
So if I were to give you $100 to like just to do USD to keep it simple instead of sats, but if I were to give you $100 for this transaction, you're like, no, I can't give it to you, Chris. You're not. You're not. I'm gonna go for the guy that's $1. It's like you just list 100x what you could make essentially.
Yeah, and then trust me, the next guy that mines the guy that mines the next block, he's gonna grab that $100 and put it right in his block and be like, I'm so happy that the last guy didn't want this.
Denied it. That makes sense.
Yeah, denied it. So in other words, they're trying to bastardize incentives, right? They're trying to change the incentives that are built into Bitcoin, and it's futile. To try to manipulate Bitcoin's signal is a futile effort. A lot of people have tried. Everyone's failed, and that's why I think you know those kinds of people get such ridicule, is because we're sitting there like pulling our hair out, going, you don't realize this is it's not going to matter. Like this system is going to stay this way because it's efficient this way.
It's just an open market.
It's an open market, right? And that's the thing
the first truly open and decentralized market, which, you know, if you look at just monetary history and our politics, it's kind of, you can argue, you don't know if we've ever really had it in our history. Maybe in caveman bartering and stuff like that. But aside from that,
but beyond that, this is the thing that trips me out the most. Okay, is beyond the monetary free aspect, right? This is a free energy market. And the world has never really known a free energy market because there's always been so many moats, so many gatekeepers, so many moats, so many regulatory moats and things. Literally, you don't even have to be 18. You don't have to pick up the phone. You don't have to talk to a single other human being, and you can sell megawatts of power and ask nobody's permission. I mean, that's the world we're living in today. All you need is an internet connection, and you can sell billions of dollars of electricity without ever talking to anybody.
It's a fascinating paradigm shift. I'm curious to see. Yeah, no one can. I mean, you can try. China tried, and it's just elsewhere. It's just
elsewhere. Yeah.
I think the water analogy, and I'm going to start wrapping up just because I have to get rolling. But
that's right. Yeah.
I think the water analogy is a nice way to think about this. Is that because it is such a decentralized and free and open market, I think it occupies space in a value sense like a fluid, where it's just going to go to the path of least resistance, but there's always, because it's a scarce amount, I know it's not truly, it's kind of physical, but it's always going to flow to the market of least resistance and whatever perceives it at the highest value for whatever players are on the side. It's just always going to flow. It'll ebb and flow.
Money gravitates to where it's treated best.
Yeah.
Right?
And it's not just
gravitates where it's treated best. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, it really is just a very fluid market that will always just flow to where it is most valued, and that's just what it is. And it doesn't care what the world does.
No, that's a good analogy. Like, yeah, it's a good analogy. It's right, and that's why those who are, you know, it's the boy with his finger in the dike, right? Those who are trying to stop the flow of water, it's you almost feel bad for them.
They'll just get tired.
Yeah, it's like, man, you're doing a cartwheel up a hill. Like this isn't gonna end well for you.
So once again, seriously, thank you for coming on the show. It was really nice to just like get your perspectives and hear, your experiences in the energy industry and also just doing some stuff in mining. I think it's brilliant. Kind of, it makes sense, and it's a shift around the world, just that it's creating a new market. It's a new technology that's like shifting paradigms of how we even just interact with energy. One thing I would love to ask and know, and I always ask the guests, is what has been your biggest maybe investment mistake or maybe Bitcoin mistake? And it can't be I didn't buy it enough early enough. What has been your biggest mistake on either of those fronts? I'd love to hear that.
My biggest mistake, even though I think my mistake in this category was probably, relatively speaking, pretty small compared to others, but it's the one that pains me the most, is I wish I would have participated immediately, right? Upon initially finding Bitcoin, I mean, I got moving really fast, but even I made a Twitter account in 2018, like August or September or something. And I would tweet here and there about Bitcoin mining and how I thought it was going to go into the oil and gas industry. But I even had fear of the ridicule, fear of, I'd already been laughed at by the entire oil and gas industry. I think the Bitcoiners laughing at me too. For some reason I was reluctant to participate. Either I was just nervous or I was afraid, or I felt like I wasn't going to be capable or something. I wish I would have just thrown myself out there and began discussing and participating in the dialogue and things a lot immediately, right? Not earlier than I did in terms of when I found Bitcoin, but I wish I'd have done it right when I found Bitcoin. And so I would encourage anybody out there that's interested in this industry, at least, interested in maybe an aspect of it, is if it really lights you on fire, just run with it. Like, go as deep as it goes, right? And then get to the point where you're literally the person that's digging that's putting the shovel in the ground for the next dig, right? Where you're literally in front of everybody else that is interested in lightning or mining. And now you're telling them which direction you think we should go. And so that's how I would recommend anybody to go into it. I mean, with the internet age, the information age, the opportunities are endless. And so get out there, right? And participate.
I love it.
Yeah. So Adam, I got a quick question for you as well. So what's your favorite book, podcast, YouTube channel, website, or anything that you go for information about Bitcoin or investing in general? You could say some of your favorite creators as well.
I'd say for sending people that are interested, like newcomers to Bitcoin that are interested, I always send them to CoinBeast. CoinBeast has great resources for like reviews on wallets and reviews on what exchanges and what fees they're going to charge you, and how it sounds like there's no fees, but actually there are. Like, CoinBeast is a great resource for all that. Plus it does a lot in like explaining the terminology and lightning nodes, all this kind of stuff. There's articles on all that. So it's a great education center. One of my favorite educators for sure, I got to give a shout out to Max and Stacy. I mean, the Orange Pill, those guys are awesome. And John Vallis is a really cool dude. I think John Vallis might be one of the best question askers I've ever, best questionnaire I've ever encountered. He asks the greatest questions. And so
we had him on. He is a great guest too.
Dude, he's a better interviewer probably than he is anything, because he's so good at asking questions. He gets so much out of people. So I really love his podcast. I usually tune into that when he's got a guest that I'm curious about. So and then obviously, I love UpStream Data, man. Definitely check out UpStream Data. We're doing some really cool stuff. I think we're the coolest oil and gas company, right up there with, Great American Mining and those awesome guys.
Yeah.
And Jai Energy, those guys are freaking sweet too. I love Ryan. He's a good dude. So anyway, really, really grateful to have you guys on, or have me on here, guys. This has been great. Your guys' podcast is sweet. You guys, that's what I said. I knew it was a side hustle for you guys because of the ambition you bring. This obviously isn't like work to you. So I always love being on podcasts with guys.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. And if someone wants to learn more about you, where should we pass them off to? Social media, your link to
check out
CoinBeast, whatever.
Denver Bitcoin on Twitter. And then definitely, if you want to connect with me, if you want to chat one-on-one, I do consultations on CoinBeast. So coinbeast.com/connect.
Yep.
Or just coinbeast.com. There's a connect button. So yeah, you can connect with me on there one-on-one, and then I donate those proceeds to Bitcoin core development. So it's for a good cause. And
yeah, we're helping keep the network strong and supporting the developers, which is super important.
Yeah.
In an open and permissionless network, basically.
Yeah, exactly. I've helped a lot of guys who were looking at investing in Bitcoin mining, and just gave them my like raw, unbiased opinion of what I think is a good decision versus a bad decision, or what trade-offs there are. And I think the value, these guys are about to invest 50 grand into Bitcoin mining, and they spend $100 to talk to me. Like, it was way worth it to them, you know? So I think for anybody in that kind of position, I'm happy to talk to you. Plus I love talking to ambitious people that are about to, you know, build out Bitcoin. Like what a great way to get connected. So
agreed.
Definitely.
Well, thank you, Adam. Seriously, this was a blast.
Yeah, thanks everyone
awesome.
for listening. This episode's coming out tomorrow, so excited for that. We're going to be having a special announcement tomorrow, so Ben and I will announce that on Twitter, Instagram, and all our social media platforms. You can always check out our shop, get some sweet merch. You know, we got hats, bags, shirts, you name it. So we've got more stuff coming there as well. So thanks everyone. Catch you later. Have a good one.
Take care.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Chris.